Hello.
Hello, hello.
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 Uh-oh, we're missing the host.
Oh no.
Oh, problem verifying my identity. All right. All right. Laura, you usually come with a deck. I suppose you probably want me to enable screen sharing.
Yes.
Okie dokes, it is enabled. We'll just give it a few moments here. Hello, everybody. How we doing today?
Hey, good. I can hear you all now.
Oh, nice.
Good.
Excellent. And I was able to hear you, Jeremy.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah, so we'll just give it a second here. Hope everybody's having nice weather today. Beautiful sunny skies here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a cool 66 degrees. Feels great. Not a cloud in the sky.
Same here in Washington, D.C. East Coast is doing it.
The
kind
East
of cloudy
Coast
here
is
in San Jose.
well, this just goes to show you the East Coast is the greater of the two coasts.
Yeah, well, I was going to say Seattle's got a nice traditional Seattle gray and an even cooler 40-something degrees.
So balmy 32 degrees here in Lake Tahoe.
32.
Ooh, boy.
But I moved to the mountains. I knew what to expect.
True. Are y'all gonna get snow? More
I
snow?
think we're supposed to get some this week. Yeah,
Nice.
that'd be nice.
Are you a skier and or snowboarder and or snowshoer?
I'm a snowboarder as of just a couple years ago.
Awesome.
So snow is actually welcome. So we get nice fluffy stuff.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah.
Be jealous.
Excellent. All right, why don't we get started? Welcome everybody to the Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 meeting of SIG Multicluster. Laura, you're first on the agenda. Why don't you go ahead?
Hey, all right, I'm going to share my screen over here. And I have two things to bring up. And I'm going to start with cluster ID, which is this KEP that I've been working on for a while. And thank you to Paul and Jeremy for making some comments. Definitely still open for more comments from other people. So come on by. And in particular, I wanted to highlight this comment that Paul had made about I had put in like a little example cluster claim for both cluster-set-k8s.io and idk8s.io with API version multicluster.k8s.io, which is assuming that we can use the API group k8s.io, which I think is possibly related to other conversations about like just how I guess we want to manage this API entry or not entry, but I wanted to break the ice on that and see if there were some opinions here.
So what was in my head was that the cluster ID resource seems like it may have applications beyond multi-cluster. So like question of k8s.io aside, multi-cluster as the finest grain name coordinate seems like we might want to think that over. And then k8s.io, someone please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that that you've got to be in tree to go for that that domain name, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be.
So I don't think that's the literal criteria, but I think that's the effective criteria. The literal criteria is that, and I'm trying to rack my memory here, if you are going to use k8s.io, you are subject to API review from the normal Kubernetes API review process, which
You are
means
correct.
you're
My
beholden
memory has been
to,
jogged.
yeah, you're beholden to me and Jordan and the few other people who feel so inspired to pick nits. In this case, I don't think that's a particular hardship because I think we want this to be generally applicable. So we don't want to go off and do crazy things. And this is a really simple API by comparison anyway. The practical side of it is it's easier. It has been in the past, I believe, easier to manage all of those APIs in a single repository, but I don't think that's literally required. And I honestly have no idea what the final pattern that we arrived at for CRDs that are using the Kates.io suffix. And like the question of who loads the CRD, what happens if the CRD gets versioned, and like what is it associated with? I honestly have no memory of what we, or if we decided on anything there.
Is there any precedent yet?
There is. Some of the storage stuff was doing CRD, but I don't know where they landed. So we should probably talk with like Michelle or someone who will certainly know what the current state is.
Cool.
Okay, taking a note. Michelle is from SIG Storage, I'm guessing.
Yes, Michelle Au. AU.
Got it. Storage has some precedent.
So what about in terms of that that
Right,
group? What
first.
about something simple like ID with fewer characters?
Do you mean id.kates.io
Yeah.
for here and up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hate that.
I don't hate it either. The only thing that I'll just like, as we make the stone soup of requirements for this name, that I'll just throw this ingredient into the bubbling cauldron, is probably it should have some relation to the eventual name of the resource that we choose.
Well,
Yeah,
do we imagine that we will ever add more to this API group? Like stretch the imagination, because we're all really bad at imagining the future. And you know, is it a name that holds? Can we imagine one other resource which might be similar in scope or use or audience that we would want to lump with this? I mean, we've talked at some point about signatures. I don't know if that would be a different resource or if that would be just another claim that modifies a current, sorry, not a claim. What do we call them? Property?
cluster property is the winner, which I haven't sent out the official email of data, but that's the standings.
So like if we wanted to have a provider sign a property, would we just make it another property that was the signature of, or would we want a separate resource?
Or would we extend the property to support signatures somehow?
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe we don't need to answer it right now, but it's something to throw into the calculus.
Yeah, and I think there's also a possibility here, like even if we introduce other kinds that aren't cluster property, calling this cluster property or properties.kates.io or cluster. I don't know if that's already taken, cluster.kates.io, just in the sense that this whole idea is about arbitrary like metadata about your cluster.
I'm pretty sure you can't.
One out.
I'm pretty sure you can't have cluster.
Okay, yeah.
Here's my throw it against the wall. About.kates.io.
Very I don't know, web 2.0.
I don't hate it.
It falls, I think, on the other side of cute for me,
Yeah.
but I don't hate it outright.
Oh, so you got the outright.
Here's one that's way cuter with regard to .kates.io.
Sincerely, Kates.io.
re:/.kates.io.
Oh, that would be great.
Let's not make this a huge deal. Like, I don't think we need to call out
Yeah.
another survey on this.
Right.
Yep.
But I see what fundamentally, Paul, you're saying, that if we put this in multicluster.kates.io, then we are, shooting ourselves in the foot of what we just said about how we think that this is generally applicable outside of a multi-cluster setup. So I hear that.
I definitely think that multi-cluster is probably just too specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I forget now, have we brought this to SIG Arch for broader view?
Not officially.
Okay, we should probably do that. And first let's talk to storage and figure out what we want to do around CRD, but then bringing it to SIG Arch and say, look, we find general utility for this within this multi-cluster space, and the cluster lifecycle folks are interested too. So we'd like to consider bringing it in tree and going with the kates.io suffix. And we're open to names, but here's the ones that we're proposing.
What it's
Gotcha.
worth, I like the idea of having cluster in the word somehow, because ID could mean so many different things.
That's
Object
true.
Identity, user identity, or so it just feels like what is this? So if it's cluster ID or clusters in the words, like information about clusters themselves.
Metadata.kates.io.
That is one that came to mind for me, but I didn't know if there would be a name collision with the meta types.
Oh, it'll be confusing for sure. I threw it out as a joke.
Well, you got me.
Meta.
All right, well, I think that's also a good highlight for, I do have this section down here that I think is probably going to be topical, especially when I go talk to SIG Arch. So I definitely would love, people who feel things about this to give this a deep look, because I'm going to be talking to people who have even more opinions about this, I think. So
yeah, talk to Michelle about the realities, or if you talk to her, and if it's useful, invite her to one of these meetings, maybe if
Okay.
you think it needs to go beyond that.
Yeah.
See what their feeling is on the repercussions of those decisions. I know that they were one of the very, very first adopters, and so they've had to deal with all of the bumps.
Cool. Good. Then they will be good to talk to about the bumps. Great. Okay. So besides the general, still open for comments lifestyle, I think that ties up all the current comments and gives me a path forward for cluster ID here. So TY. And then next topic that I would like to discuss is about multi-cluster DNS, aka you thought I was done talking to you about CAPS with this one, but the answer is no, because I want to talk about multi-cluster DNS also. So I made this document, and this is something that's specifically in the MCS API kept as blocking to graduation to the next step to figure out, a specification for multi-cluster DNS. So that's why I want to open the conversation here. So there's a bunch of, background and stuff in here. And I just made this public, yesterday. So I think this is mostly just to introduce it and tell people to give it a look. And one thing I want to highlight, which I also highlighted in this comment here, is that a lot of the meat of the proposal is literally lifted from the DNS spec that already exists for a single cluster, like records for a service with cluster IP, like a quad A record, serve record, blah, blah, blah. And then to try and make it easier to read, I've highlighted in orange where I've materially deviated from the prose of the original specification, so that it's hopefully more clear when you're reading this, what I'm drawing from existing and what I'm doing the new multi-cluster lifestyle on. And it's explained in the background as well, but the idea is that all of these record proposals would, fit in like section, 4 point whatever, 3 point whatever, like it would be another addition into this, like this DNS spec that already exists. So hopefully that gives some intro and is my request to please take a look at it. And then as people put comments, I'm going to try and do a couple rounds here of, answering them or giving more presentations here to, get some more people on board. I'll also take any original thoughts, if any, or initial thoughts, I guess, if people have already given it a look or have feelings.
So 2 thoughts. First, I think it's worth kind of blasting out to the list for everyone who can't make this meeting.
Gotcha.
And to get more eyes on it. And second, do you just want to kind of give us a TLDR on what's different?
Totally. I do. So from the original spec, there are already specified quad A records for cluster IP, serve records, PTR records, and then the same thing for headless services. And so that's what I'm deriving from. And then specifically, I'll talk about for cluster IP services. I think probably the most important thing is this first one here is kind of like the representative record format that basically there will be a cluster set IP that's assigned by the MCS controller. And so there should be a DNS record that at service.namespace.svc.clusterset zone, which should be clusterset.local as opposed to cluster.local for that cluster set IP. So the example here might be if you had this multi-cluster service name in this namespace, SVC is normal lifestyle. I spelled this wrong, cluster set. How embarrassing.
I know. Part of me misses supercluster, I gotta say.
I know, embarrassing. Cluster set.local. So here you can also see I spelled it right down here and spelled it wrong up here, so my bad. So that's the main case for the cluster IP services, cluster IP type services. And then scrolling down a while, for headless services, there's kind of an important point here, which is while following the original spec, for every ready endpoint for a headless service should have a DNS name following that same pattern. Scrolling down, there also should be the possibility here that we take, just like this is also derived from what headless services do now, but there should be a record format, host name, cluster ID, bing, 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 this is the important change here, service, NS, SVC, cluster set zone, for each ready endpoint for a headless service. So like possible effect here would be if this was the cluster ID, because this is like a cube system namespace UUID type thing, and maybe it has this host name, then we would be able to disambiguate even if there was something with even the same host name in the same namespace by this cluster ID if there was a headless service in multiple clusters.
So I apologize that I have not been able to read this yet. Once I come out the other side of code freeze and perf week, this will be high on my list. All the Google people are laughing. So obviously I'm very close to the existing DNS schema, so I know where all the bodies are buried. I hate it, and yet my inclination is probably that consistency with it is better than changing it here. Even though I want to change the main schema, we have to figure out a way to version that and make it opt-in so that people can migrate. And we have some proposals around that, but given how immature those are, my inclination is to say that, yeah, following the pattern, even though the SVC is completely useless in this context, is probably the right thing to do. I want to say one of the biggest problems in the original the in-cluster DNS was sort of over-specking stuff in a way that we weren't really sure was going to be useful. So I want to be really careful as we look through this that we don't specify things that we don't really need yet. I don't know if that applies or not, but I want to think hard about that. Specifically, like the stuff, the headless names, is useful in very, very limited contexts. I want to be careful with that. And the other one that I think actually we got wrong and we will have to fix in the regular schema is this notion of ready endpoints. I think there is still value. If there is an A name assigned to an endpoint, there's a value in having it assigned even when the endpoint isn't ready, just not being part of the RR set for the larger name. And that's something we're going through right now with service and making drains cleaner and is respecting not ready. Not ready is different than not existing. And we need to be clear about that. But otherwise, I think you're taking the right approach. So I promise you that I will read it and we will talk.
Awesome.
We should also get John, you should get John Bellameric to take a look at this. He owns the DNS, well, he and Pavitra own the DNS spec in the SIGNet context. And he's a core DNS maintainer, so he would probably have useful context.
He has also agreed to be a reviewer for MCS for exactly this purpose. So yeah, we should reach out.
Word. Okay, well, definitely just even gave me some tips like about the ready endpoint drama that's going on. Definitely hear you on the, like, I knew there was something going on with y'all about wanting to change how DNS works, but I definitely wasn't prepared to solve that problem.
Yeah, no, it's not fair to lump that on you. And honestly, even though all the problems, the worst problems that we have with the pod, or what's called the single cluster DNS schema, don't really apply here because I don't expect users to be setting up their search paths into clusterset.local. But actually they can. And so this will be subject to some of the same boo-boos that we made there. Which, you know, honestly, if we're going to fix it, we'll fix it in both places at the same time. So consistency probably better.
Gotcha. Okay, then I think my final call to action is to everybody is to give this a read. Feel free to comment, and then I'll also come back next week and give sort of a little like presentation about the basics on it too. And then if there are any comments between now and then, I can also surface those at that time for discussion.
You may also, like, let's do a first draft here and make sure that we are sort of comfortable with the spec. Then we should get SIGNet to give it a glance.
Awesome. Great. Okay, I think those are my two topics.
Okay, so the next one I put on here, I didn't hear any dissent on archiving cluster registry repo from the mailing list. Please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we are achieving lazy consensus now to do that. So my only question to this group is like, do we do an explanatory commit to that before we archive it?
I think that's the usual path, right? To leave a tombstone in the README or something.
Okay, I haven't archived something in Cube before, so I'll see what I can dig up around like the right way to do that and cut a tombstone commit to that repo.
Hopefully it's all skull and bone emojis is the representative commit.
We'll see what we can do. I make no promises. All right. The only other thing I've got is just that that Chojin and Rainbow and Mango are kind of working on some of the stuff in Work API repo. There's been like a client package that has gone in. The proposal has gotten translated into a markdown. So I am going to ask Chojin if you could give a readout on that in our next meeting. And we can talk as a group about like what direction do we feel it needs to go in to get it to kind of like an alpha state and that kind of thing. EOF from me.
Awesome.
Okay. I think we're done for now.
I think so.
Think so.
Okie doke. Everybody have a good day.
Happy
Thanks,
Code
Noel.
Freeze Day.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks,
See
everyone.
everybody.
Hey,
Bye.
sorry. Last note. Did everybody see that the Kubernetes rolled over to 100,000 this morning?
Hooey,
Pretty
I
cool.
hadn't seen that.
Yep, 100K issues and PRs. Pretty
Nice.
That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Just pat yourselves on the back, everybody. Thanks for participating. It's been a hell of a ride so far, but I claim dibs on 1 million.
Did you see that
I
the,
think it's
did you see the
go
issue
ahead.
number 100,000 was that there are no 6-digit issues in Kubernetes?
Yes, it was Mr. Craig Box being a smart aleck.
Good for the lore.
Yes, I told him that will go down in the annals of Cube trivia. The next time there's somebody wants to do a Kubernetes trivia game, they always ask who has commit number 1, and now they'll be able to ask who has commit number 100,000.
Oh, that's absolutely going to be in the Kubernetes edition of Trivial Pursuit, brought to you by Parker Brothers.
All right, have a great day, everybody.
All right. See you, everyone. Bye.
ya.
Yeah.